Don't be scared to enjoy. If you don't make time for yourself, if you don't enjoy yourself, if you don't have hobbies, you're never going to be that complete version of yourself. You need something that makes you tick in life, not just business. Finding that work-life balance. Okay, we're all locked in this cycle of comparing ourselves to the next person. Whether you're on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, we look at what other people are doing. What we need to do is actually look introspectively at ourselves. Okay, what are our qualities? What great characteristics do we have? What is our vibe? What do we want to achieve? So learn from your mistakes and you're happy to pass that on. Men don't all have to be alpha. That is false. Deep inside, a lot of that alpha is created from bond trauma, which creates fearful, avoidant attachment styles. Your family's always got to be your number one, your hobbies at number two. Place them in first and second order throughout your day, throughout your week. Place your work in a third or fourth place behind that. And that's okay. I want to spend this time with my children. I want to do this on this weekend. I'm not going to be able to take that call. That's setting boundaries.
So you talk about burnout being described as, or being disguised as, hustle. Can you expand a little bit on that, about the mindset maybe around that people do go through that I want to be Greg the businessman rather than Greg the well-rounded person? Why do people do that? What's the mindset there?
I feel like social comparison theory is really, really interesting. Okay, we're all locked in this cycle of comparing ourselves to the next person. Whether you're on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, we look at what other people are doing, what cars they're driving, what wife they have, what holidays they have. And I feel that puts us into this hustle environment. Okay, or actually what we need to do is actually look introspectively at ourselves. Okay, what are our qualities? What great characteristics do we have? What is our vibe? What do we want to achieve? So that hustle, I feel, comes out of something maybe that is institutionalized, something that's there which is bigger than us. You know, in England, we had the great industrialization. It created people, going into the working week. That's why we have football. That's why we have stuff like that here. But what that actually did as well was locked people into a cycle, wasn't it, of getting mortgages, of realizing they've got to look a certain way, do a certain thing. I don't think that's very human. I feel like that's more of like in a zoo, isn't it? I feel like that is the big turning moment that happened with COVID, is actually men in particular realised that there was more to life than work. The great resignation was huge. People left their jobs in droves after COVID and lockdowns because they were spending time at home. They realised that there was more to it. So my answer to burnout is probably a more intricate question. There's many elements to that equation, if you like. But I feel most of it comes from social comparison theory, is us looking at others, trying to better ourselves, if that makes sense.
From a coaching perspective, if you're coaching somebody that might be struggling with that, because from what you said, you say no to, is it Insta fantasy? Is that the phrasing that you use? Insta fantasy coaching. So it's not quick hacks. It's not, I'll just do these things. How do you go about coaching somebody through that? What's the longer term success or growth that you work on with people?
Again, Becky, that's such a great question. The basis for any coaching is reflection. So let's say that most people I work with is going to be between 6 to 8 weeks. The real basis of that is getting to know them as a person, what their interests are, what their hobbies are. Then, obviously, a 6-week schedule where at the end you mold them and sculpt them with life hacks, Eisenhower Matrix, stuff like this, trying to get them to actually prioritize what makes them tick, if that makes sense. But that's impossible without a reflection. That's impossible without someone looking at your life from the outside in and saying, look, you're spending more time commuting to work than you are with your own children, for example. That's massive. You'd be really surprised when you look at the CEO and C-suite industries, how much time they don't spend at home with their children and how that makes them unhappy, okay? But if you reframe that, if you change that, if you look at their schedules, if you get them to understand that actually you don't need to have this amount of meetings, that you can work 4 days a week, you can do this from home, you can take this supplement, prioritize sleep, that will improve you, that will make you better, that will optimize you. But that isn't possible without that deep reflection, that first part. So yeah, again, that's a great question. But what I would say is everyone's story is different. People's struggles can be quite similar, all right? But people's stories are very, very different. So creating an intricate plan for that is also different, if that makes sense. So any coach that goes out there and says, I've got a simple method to make you 10,000 a month or get you 30 leads or give you a 6-pack in 6 weeks, is simply not true. because we're all so different. We all need such, differentials to get from A to B, if that makes sense.
So I'm interested in this from, like, I guess, a woman's perspective, right? Looking at the masks. So one of your podcasts is called Masculinity Unmasked. So I guess thinking about what those masculine masks are and where they come from. Is it expectation from women? Is it expectation from other men? Is it society as a whole? Is it biological? Like, where do you think these masks come from, and where do you think they show up?
Again, Becky, that's such a brilliant question. Well, look, we all wear many hats in life. Okay, so men and women. A woman can be a mum, a sister, a friend, businesswoman, whatever that might be. All different sorts of hats. But I feel, again, a generalisation, that women's hats are a little bit more defined, if that makes sense. For men, again, like I said about that, the male ego, the Insta fantasy. I feel that a lot of these come from childhood and where you grow up, and the role models that you've got in your life. Actually, if you look at where bond trauma comes from and where attachment styles are created, it's all created, when you're in a younger age, if you like, between 4 to 7, 9 to 11, and 11 upwards. I feel that is created as you're becoming that product of your environment, if that makes sense. A lot of it is that social comparison theory where, if you look at what phones have done for society, for men in particular, the amount of guys that have got six packs, the amount of guys that are driving around in pink Lamborghinis, etc., the likes of Andrew Tate. Can you imagine how detrimental that is for the everyday guy, that they expect that to be normal? If you're 15, 16, 17, before you go in the workplace, this is all you've seen, and this is what you expect life to be like. And then you have that massive crushing moment when you realise it's not. Actually, I'd say that guys at the moment haven't had that so much, but can you imagine what that next age group's going to have, that Gen Z, where they realise that life's maybe not like that. I think that's a real interesting discussion, actually, is where does this go? What has social media done to people? How has it adapted people as they go through life?
It's one of those things, I think, that both genders have their own societal pressures or expectations, and most probably don't understand what goes on from the other side. If I try and look at it as objectively as possible, looking at the pressures on men, especially now versus, let's say, everything up to about 50 years ago, where maybe things were a bit more men do this, women do this. Now lines are more blurred, and who does what, whose role is what, who's expected to do what. Men are expected to earn better than women. I think most women still say they want their partner to earn more than them, but also help out in the home as well as much, and also have expectations there. Also, you've got to have a six pack. Also, got to have, all these different things that I think, yes, women have their own pressures, and I'm not taken away from that at all. But there's a lot of conflicting pressures now on men that weren't there for most of human history that are now, and it must be pretty difficult to navigate.
Absolutely. I feel like I said, men are going for a silent struggle. This wasn't just created by COVID and the lockdowns. This has been coming along for some time, if that makes sense. So I'm interested to see where this goes. I know we talked a little bit about the difference between the UK and the US, and I've lived in both. Toxic masculinity in the UK is huge at the moment. Mainly, I feel, based because some of the role models that we've got here. We're crying out for better role models. We're crying out for better people in politics, in movies, in life in general, to impact on people. So I feel that's where that is a funnel, as you like, isn't it? And that's where it trickles down. Do I see this getting better? Is probably the real question to your question, Becky. I say no. I think that we're on a bit of a slippery slope for some time. I feel that men are going to continue a silent struggle, but I do feel that like coaching and networks are becoming a lot better. It's like, actually, there are so many more places now for men to look for help. Because actually, coaching predominantly, life coaching predominantly, before I believe about 6 years ago, was female-based. Okay, so if you look at it now, we are already going through a huge, huge change. So where's that going to be in another 6 years? I think that's exciting times for that. I do feel like these networks are getting better. Men have more opportunity. And I think it's more socially acceptable now for men to say that I'm not okay. That something's wrong. I've got a great example. I know, one of the golden rules of coaching is you don't talk about yourself. But I've got a great example for this. For 20 years of my life, alcohol was a massive part of my life. It is in the UK. You are socially unacceptable if you go out to a dinner and you don't drink. If you go to the football and you don't drink. In the UK, if you win, you drink. If you lose, you drink. In every work culture, it's there. I've not had a drink for 144 days. And that's because I'm more comfortable about saying no than ever. That's not just me, that's society, if that makes sense. And if you understand the idea of like dry January and these sort of things, that scope is changing massively. So do I feel that men are on a silent struggle, and is it going to get worse? Yes. But do I feel like the networks are getting better? Absolutely. Absolutely.
You level up with the game. What would you say to the guy or girl listening right now who's outwardly successful but secretly hollowed out?
Great question. Again, Dave, I feel that's like the biggest question at the moment, isn't it? And also as well, when you look at everyone's LinkedIn profile and everyone's X's profile, this is what all the coaches are chasing. This is the biggest niche at the moment, isn't it? Work-life balance. It's okay. Like I said, it's okay to say that something's not right, not okay. But what would I say to them is to journal. It's the first. Also, try and join up the dots. Try and work out what isn't right. What are you missing? Maybe you're not having enough sleep. Maybe you're drinking too much alcohol. Maybe you're smoking. Maybe there was a relationship crisis, for example. That only comes from journaling. That's always got to be the pillars, the first part. The next thing is the Eisenhower Matrix. How powerful is that? This idea where you start to prioritize what is most important to you and why. And again, that doesn't come unless you have that journaling. So obviously your family's always got to be your number one, your hobbies at number two. Place them in first and second order throughout your day, throughout your week. Place your work in a third or fourth place behind that. And that's okay. Especially if you've made it to that level, to the top levels, then it's really okay to say, look, I want to spend this time with my children. I want to do this on this weekend. I'm not going to be able to take that call because I'm doing this. That's setting boundaries. And there are mechanisms to that as well. I openly coach a lot of my people to have two phones, which sounds ludicrous in a world where I want people to limit their time on phones, but to set yourself times on what phone. So to have one phone for your family, one phone for your work, and to see it as I'm only going to use this phone between 10 and 3 p.m. 4 days a week, and then don't touch it. That is setting boundaries, if you like. And again, that all comes from those frameworks, from those deep chats, from being honest, and actually building relationships with your clients, getting to know them. I'm a firm believer in coaching that you can't lead others down a path if you haven't walked it yourself. By the way, so if you look at what I did as a job, and all us guys here, we've all learnt through trial and error, if that makes sense, which is a great, it's called PTG, post-traumatic growth, where you learn from your mistakes and you're happy to pass that on.
Yeah, it doesn't come in a pill, doesn't come in a book. You definitely have to walk the walk sometimes. That said, pills and books are great supplements to that path, but I think we're each walking our own path. It's interesting you said what coaching isn't. I think it can depend on what type of coach you are as well. I'm taking this course right now at the University of Toronto, and they're following the ICF and also the Association for Coaching Models. And it surprised me. Like I realized that I'd been coaching a little bit differently and maybe going into more of like the advisory role or the consultant role or the mentor role rather than what they consider the coaching role, which is you don't tell people what to do at all. You don't guide them at all. You hold up a mirror strategically and help them guide themselves. All the answers, like they know what it was like. You don't. Like it's already basically changed just in their retelling of their experience. And then when it lands in your ears, it's changed once again because you might have meant it this way. I heard it this way. And then I map that to my experience, which is different from your experience. And then I tell you, which has already changed again. I mean, if you go through that, it's crazy. Like we wind up in a totally different situation. So asking questions is something that I've taken away from that so far. And I'd like to talk about your journey a little bit. You've gone from educator to coach to helping VIP families to now podcast host. What's next for you? And what are you building now that's legacy level?
Okay, so I've always had this belief, by the way, that your niche finds you. And that's always gone throughout my whole career, if you like. I never saw myself as a teacher. I actually wanted to be a football player. I had an injury, and that led me into teaching. I never saw myself working for VIP families. I never applied for it. It found me, by the way. And like coming into a coach, again, I learned from failing myself and having that traumatic episode in my life. So I see life as an opportunity. If something presents itself, you have to take it. I feel like my biggest dilemma is how far I take this. Is it to go on more podcasts? Is it to write a book? Is it to be more honest about my experiences? But that also comes from a deep dive within myself. I've openly tell other coaches, I mentor other coaches within the coach trap. There is a line that you don't cross in terms of stuff that you're prepared to show and not show. I've never talked about my wife. By the way, you'll never find a lot of pictures of my wife anywhere over my LinkedIn or my ex or whatever. I guess that's a big question for me, is where do I take this? What I love about the podcasts are they are so powerful. It's so different than going on CapCut and talking off a script, if you like. It's authentic, it's real. And also I feel it's the greatest way to build authority. So I guess a lot of that is to go on more podcasts, to get my name out there a little bit more, but my real goal is to drive the coach trap. 86% of coaches quit or fail every year, and it's not because they're bad coaches. Sorry, it's because they're bad marketers. So, and actually, I'm a firm believer that actually coaches are type B and marketers are type A. So, type A is your Wolf of Wall Street, your hustlers, if you like, and type B is us three sat here wanting to help people, giving up our time for free. Yeah, as I would say in the UK. The dinner ladies, the lollipop ladies, the ones who care about other people, right? But to be a good coach in this business, you've got to lean into your line and you've got to be more up the middle, if that makes sense. So that's a big thing of what I'm trying to hone in on at the moment, that to teach other people, is that there are tactics and strategy to this, and you don't get taught that with an ICF qualification. You get taught how to coach, but you don't get taught how to put yourself out there. It's very, very different. And if you look at LinkedIn and X, we're all the same. We're all the same. Everyone uses Canva, CapCut, Chat, GTP or whatever. And then we're all the same. That's why 86% fail. So it's finding that authenticity, being yourself. And ultimately that comes from being okay with that person that looks back at you in the mirror. And that's a big part of the coach trap, and what we're coaching at the moment is to be proud of what you're doing, like who looks back at you. Sense. But David, that's a great question. I know that's a really long-winded answer, but to grow the coach trap even more.
It's really interesting that we speak to business people of different kind of from different industries, and it ultimately comes down to marketing a lot of the time, right? How do you could be selling the best thing in the world, you could be really changing people's lives, but if they don't know that it exists, or you're not getting in front of the right people, it's never going to happen. Nearly always, it seems like there is a strong correlation between the success of a business and what goes on between people's ears, their mindset and their habits as well. So when you were talking about being on our phones and having two phones and being strict about time that we spend and saying, no, I'm not going to join that call this weekend because I've got these family things. Again, I feel like that's a very recent thing in life that you think. In the 90s, my mum ran her own business in the 90s, and she said when we went on holiday because people didn't know what hotel we were in. They'd have had to have found out the hotel and call the hotel and leave a message if we weren't there. Whereas now you can get a message that pings up on your phone immediately, and we think we have to respond immediately, and we're not necessarily managing all of those, for want of a better term, triggers for stress or triggers for overwhelm. What are some of the things that you would advise, or that you maybe do yourself, to help you with that, what's between your ears? And that might be the phone thing, or it might be exercise, whatever. But what are the things that help you to have your mindset where it needs to be?
Becky, what a brilliant question. Okay, lots of many angles to do this. You'd be really surprised how caffeine is such a trigger for people. And the big thing of why maybe matcha is starting to trend at the moment, because it has slightly different triggers. Alcohol, caffeine, anxiety. You've just got to think about that for a second, the big knock-on effect. But that's like being more wholesome in your life, isn't it? In terms of stress and triggers and anxiety and being, overwhelmed, if you like, I think it's just really structuring your life, if that makes sense, and being prepared to actually structure. I was going to say boredom. Boredom's the wrong thing, but free time in there. You don't always have to be on the hustle. You don't always have to be on the go. Screen time's obviously massive as well, isn't it? There's no doubt about that, and the implications that spends of scrolling all day or looking at things all day. So obviously meditation is really, really helpful. If you think about maybe 10 minutes a day, more so at the end part of your day, seems to be really, really, really helpful. But journaling is obviously a real pillar to this, and the one method's great. 1 minute in the morning, one method in the afternoon, one method at night, just to make sure that you're on top of things. But also going back to phones and apps where I said, you shouldn't use it. Using Google Calendar, just being on top of your events and making sure that you're not missing out and you know what's coming up. You openly talked about that. If you get a text message, a notification, I live by that, by the way. There's no way that you're going to remember managing 40 clients a week and a football team and your wife and whatever. You need reminding. Okay, so that's part of it. But again, it doesn't come without reflection. It doesn't come without being honest about your life. And this is my problems. This is what I'm facing. And this is what I want to do to be better, is part of the process.
Mm-hmm. I found I actually took notifications off my phone for everything apart from WhatsApp. And I choose to go into my emails now at set times of the day, or to go into whatever, Instagram, LinkedIn, same thing. It's a choice that I make consciously to do it rather than it is thrown at me. And my mum suggested, my mum's a life coach as well, by the way. So my mum suggested that to me. And at the time, I was like, as if that's going to change anything. And I have to get back to people. They're going to need me to respond immediately. When she told me this thing, well, in the 90s, people lived. They didn't hear back from you in 3 days. No one's going to die. And I took notifications off my phone. And I have to say, it was almost immediately calming. It's made a huge difference to the level of, I think, just the level of processing that my brain has to do every day. I'm not looking at 1,000 different things from hundreds of different apps on my phone, all telling me different stuff. I choose to say, what am I doing tomorrow? Okay, this is what's happening. I know that. This person's emailed me. I do something about that, but it's not thrown at me whilst I'm in the middle of something else. And it's such a small thing, but it has such a huge impact. And I think a lot of those things that we talk about, meditation or journaling, it's a small thing. The 111, that's 3 minutes a day. It's not a big change, but it has a huge impact. And all you need to do is pick something small, I guess. If you're doing none of those things, is pick one.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think one of the things I really worked at as well was having a digital detox. So we were talking about this before I come on. I've done this for the last 3 years. I literally take a whole month off. So the people who help me run my company, when I didn't do it in my previous job, they go mad. But I say, I need it. It's to rewire, by the way. And you come back so rejuvenated. A part of you does have to reconnect and create habits again. 66 days to create a habit. You do fall out of sync with a few things, but you come back a new person, by the way. So I cannot recommend that enough, to at least take a week off every year and try to limit interactions, work emails, phones. But you talk there about notifications. It goes back to that Eisenhower Matrix, actually setting times and dates that you're going to do something, blocking off in your Google Calendar as this is red, that is green, this is blue. It's okay to check work emails between this time, and to habit stack, by the way. So if you've got a commute into work and you're sat on the tube or the underground, what a great time to look at emails. If you're, walking the dog and you want to listen to a podcast, for example, again, habit stacking, or listen to voice notes. Again, it doesn't come from that deep reflection, from that writing it all down, joining up the dots, and you can't do that on yourself. I always find that's the glory of coaching. Actually, David, you talked about coaching and therapy are two completely different things. And I feel like the general public still get this mixed up. I feel like that's really interesting when you speak with somebody who doesn't know what they're going into. A therapist sits there with a clipboard and they analyse you. A coach is there to support you and help you, if that makes sense, isn't it? They are your cheerleader.
I would also add, like we often use labels as heuristics, like, do I need this or that? But when it comes to like coaching, I would encourage people to try a few different coaches because I think fit is really important too. And I might just have that be a blanket recommendation for if whatever you do, try a few of them. Just because it might be the one that you tried wasn't the right fit for you, rather than just writing off the whole industry. And But yeah, I agree. And what you mentioned about the detox reminded me of this other gentleman we spoke to recently he took that to the extreme and did like a whole sensory detox where it's like a darkness retreat. Have you heard of these, Greg?
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yes, I've heard similar things.
Like 4 days or something like that, I
It was
think.
5 days. 5 days.
5 days.
He sat in the dark. He didn't eat either. If I'm right, he only drank water. He
That's
fasted.
And he said he was like starting to hallucinate, right? Like DMT or whatever, and your brain starts getting released.
But it was so transformative that he's doing it again. So to me, I can't think of anything worse than doing that. But I can see why that would be transformational.
What you're talking about there in the future will be the norm. So this is something to really understand as well. If you look at how habits have changed, say from that, talking about your mum, Becky, compared to now, some of the stuff that we're talking about taking retreats, digital detoxes, can you imagine what that's going to look like in 10 years' time? Can you imagine
the whole industry around it?
Neuralink and all these things in working remotely? I know David were talking about digital nomads. Can you imagine what life is going to look like in 10 years' time? I find that incredibly exciting and incredibly scary all at the same time. But I do feel like the networks are improving. The frameworks for personal development and for mindfulness are developing rapidly, aren't they? So exciting times.
What's one thing you learned from Rod Stewart, directly or indirectly?
To enjoy yourself and don't take life too seriously, I would say. Like I said, I remember in the newspaper a few years ago, there was a story about Prince Charles, and he was walking through the countryside and he got slated for this in the UK press. How can a man at the top of the tree take this amount of time off when the country's in a time of crisis? Actually, if you think about it, taking that walk, I imagine, was a huge time for thinking. And that's what I said, that everything that I've worked out through working with these 0.1% is to make time for your children, to make time for your wife, and to make time for your hobbies, actually to step away from the hustle. And as you get older, and I didn't know this in my early 20s, you realise that there's more to life than earning money. If I could change anything in my life, it would have been to not hustle so much in my 20s. It would have been to explore. It would have been to get out more. It would have been to travel more. But you don't know that at the time. You don't know that in hindsight. But when we talked about that post-traumatic growth, that PTG, you learn from your mistakes, and then you can pass that wisdom on, if you like. So if I was going to pass anything on, is to look at your authentic self, to try and be happy with who looks back at you in the mirror, and don't be scared to enjoy. Don't be scared to take part in a hobby. For me, it's golf at the moment. I never played golf 10 years. Well, I wanted to play golf 10 years ago, but now I make it a huge priority in my life. And I'm definitely a better husband, a better coach, a better person. So that's what I recommend to people, is make time for what makes you happy. And that's something that I think men don't do. And women as well, Becky. If you look at how many people work 2 jobs, or they do this, or they are struggling to fit stuff in, I feel like that's something that people are missing out on.
Do you have oh, sorry, go ahead, Becky.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think for Gen Z or Gen Z, wherever you are, how you pronounce that the trend is going a little bit more towards, when they're offered promotions, they're more likely to say no. I'm not willing to do the extra hours or the extra stress for whatever extra money. And it'd be interesting to see how that changes the way work goes, or if maybe just a very small percentage will go, yeah, I'll do all the work. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out generationally, if people are chasing the dollar bill or the pound. No?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Less.
Like I said with this, what's the world going to look like in 10 years' time? I think it will look very, very, very different. I've got a great example of this. I've been to Ibiza for the same week every year for about 20 years. So I started going in my early 20s, and I'd go with friends, and now I'm 38, I'll go with my wife, right? And the island has changed massively. It's still this crazy party place. But what was back in the day is, 19 to 25-year-olds going for a week at a time and going crazy and losing their minds. You go there now, it's very, very different. Gen Z don't drink as much as previous generations. They are very more in touch with what's going on around them, like you're talking about promotions. And I think that's quite exciting if you look. Actually, they seem healthier, more in touch with life, wanting to enjoy themselves in different ways. And I think that's what we're starting to see in terms of the job market as well, isn't it? Is that they are learning that it's okay to say no, to be happy. Again, that makes me really excited to see what the future is going to look like, but more so for the coaching space, because men more than ever are happy and more comfortable to look for help.
Where can people follow you and keep up with what you're doing?
So I'm obviously on X and on LinkedIn, but the best place to find me would be the Coach Trap website. There's all my links on there, and I run two podcasts, a newsletter, and I talk about many things. First of all, my biggest love is life coaching, all of the aspects that I've learned in my life and what I learn off other coaches, but also I interview other coaches, so I learn lots of stuff from those guys as well.
Thanks for talking with us, Greg. It was a really interesting conversation. Your career has been remarkable so far, and I think it's only getting started, or at least this next chapter will be exciting as well.
Thanks for having me on, guys.